What is a timeshare and how exactly does it work? That is a question I have wondered myself, many times in fact. So I did a little reading and research and I want to share some of that with you. At the lowest common denominator, a timeshare is essentially a method or a way to purchase use of a property for a period of time. And I was specific in defining it that way because in not all cases do you actually own a portion of real property. Sometimes you are buying a physical share. Other times you are buying the right to use a property, and timeshares can even be structured as lease agreements. So let's dig a little bit deeper into some of those details. Hey everyone, this is Ben from ExploreInformed, where we dig into the details of travel. So the next time you go exploring, you can go a little bit better informed. Before we get started, today we're talking briefly about timeshares. First, feel free to comment down below if you have any thoughts about timeshares. And two, consider liking this video or subscribing to this channel. All types of engagement help this channel, and more importantly, they help your fellow explorers. So today we're talking about timeshares, and we will do our best to provide a primer or a brief overview. But timeshares frankly get more complicated the further you peel back the onion, and we cannot possibly cover all the details. But I hope I can, one, help you understand specifically what they are, and two, better understand how it is that timeshares are structured and how they function. So as I said in the opening, timeshares are a method or a pathway to purchasing access or use of a property for a duration of time, and timeshares come in a variety of forms. So let's talk about that for just a minute. First, some timeshares are sold as deeded ownership. And in this case, you are granted fractional or partial ownership of a real property, with a percentage of ownership being roughly equal to the amount of time you have purchased. So if 52 people each buy a one-week timeshare at a condo in Florida, they each own 1/52nd of that real property, and 52 deeds will be issued on that property. Now, deeded ownership can potentially be complex, depending on the local real estate laws, and is probably made more complex when you have 52 different owners for the same piece of property. A second variation on the timeshare is the leased ownership model, which sounds a bit like an oxymoron, but that's beside the point. Instead of purchasing permanent deeded ownership, one can lease ownership for a certain period of time. The most common characteristic of note with this model is that leased interest typically expires after a certain period of time, or at the latest upon death. As one is only leasing ownership, this arrangement may be more restrictive and may not, for example, permit selling or transferring your interest to another person. Thirdly, one can enter into a right-to-use contract in which the purchaser is acquiring the ability to use the property in accordance with a contract. This type of arrangement is similar to lease ownership and is time-boxed to a fixed period of time. However, right to use is really common in certain regions, like Mexico, for example, where certain laws or regulations only permit certain types of timeshare models to be used. And in some cases, right to use is actually the only option if you want to even acquire a timeshare in that area. And with right to use, it's important to note that in some cases, you may in fact be acquiring your right through an adjacent channel, like buying into a club membership or actually acquiring the right to use a reservation system. So those are three of the most common types of timeshare structures or models: deeded ownership, leased ownership, and right to use. Now let's talk a little bit about how timeshares often structure the time at which you visit your timeshare, because there are a few different types of arrangements. First is what they call fixed week ownership, meaning you have purchased the right to visit during the same week each year. Most timeshare resorts will establish a weekly calendar each year that basically plots out the check-in and check-out dates for each weekly increment. In a fixed week ownership arrangement, you will own whichever week you please, but it will remain the same week annually. Also of note, prices will of course vary considerably based upon the desirability of each given week. For example, week 51 will include Christmas, so buying a fixed week timeshare for week 51 will be significantly more expensive than another week, like a week in a shoulder season, for example. Alternatively, you can purchase a floating week timeshare in which you have access during a certain season or period, as defined by the resort, which is important. For example, the off-season will be defined as a specific set or range of weeks and will be cheaper than prime or high season, which is likely to be the peak summer, winter, or holiday season depending on where the property is located. Owners will have some flexibility to choose a week within that purchase season, but will still be restricted to a specific range of weeks. Now, some resorts also feature a few different benefits or features to give owners a bit more flexibility. By the way, timeshare resorts call their members owners, presumably to maximize the perceived value of your timeshare investment. Many properties or resorts will offer exchange programs to allow an owner to exchange weeks at one property for a week at another participating property. For example, you can trade week 12 in Florida for week 12 in Hawaii if you want to change things up a little bit. Granted, there will be some rules around doing so, which may be more restrictive than expected. That is in part because not all properties and destinations are of equal value, of course, but the intent is to provide some flexibility if and when desired. And more recently, timeshare resorts have created points programs in which owners trade in a fixed or variable week in exchange for points, or they're issued an allotment of points upon purchase. These points are kind of similar to airline miles or hotel points and can be used to book a stay at your home property or across the resort's network. And the more you spend, the more points you receive, giving you the ability to book more time or book a more expensive property. But again, there is going to be some variability in pricing between different properties. So in buying a timeshare, there are several different options around 1, how the ownership is legally structured, 2, how you secure your bank of time at the property, and 3, what you can do to add a little flexibility within your timeshare investment. Let's talk a little bit about one pro and one con of timeshares. Now, in my opinion, the greatest benefit of owning a timeshare is the predictability. With a timeshare, you are most often purchasing guaranteed access to the same property at the same time every year. Basically, you know what you're getting, which is the same thing over and over. And if that's what you want, then a timeshare may be a good option for you. And for those times when you want some flexibility, you may have options like flexible weeks or options to convert to a point system depending on the type of timeshare arrangement you have purchased. But the biggest con, in my opinion, is how the costs are structured. You have to purchase a timeshare initially, and most everyone is also required to pay recurring maintenance charges. You have to purchase a timeshare upfront by either paying the full cost or financing. But either way, you're locking up a big chunk of cash into an asset that isn't quite tangible, isn't always easy to sell, and is an asset which requires your use be equally distributed across its life. You will also run into recurring maintenance fees that are likely to be incurred regardless of whether you use the property. You also don't really have a lot of control over those fees. Even if those fees are locked in, timeshare resorts will introduce new tiers or new features to encourage upselling or buying up, which indirectly devalues your timeshare relative to their other options. But frankly, you and I both know there are pros and cons to everything. And as I mentioned before, you and only you get to decide how you travel, and you and only you get to decide how you spend your money. However, if you are considering a timeshare, in my opinion, you should think about a few things. 1, the cost of a timeshare relative to the cash rate at a similar property over the life of your timeshare. 2, how you expect or forecast those costs to change over time. And 3, the cost of being locked into a timeshare. Think opportunity cost. Now, I cannot do that analysis for you, as most of us place different values on each part of the travel experience. But you need to do that work if you are considering purchasing a timeshare. And now as we close, as a bit of a disclaimer or warning, I am not a subject matter expert in the area of timeshares. Most likely, I am just like you, an enthusiastic traveler who's curious about how things work. So if you have a comment, question, or even a correction, please feel free to comment down below in the comments section. So that is all we have for this video. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at ExploreInformed. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.